Broadcasting from the commodity capital of the world, Zurich, Switzerland, this is Insider's Guide to Energy.
This edition to Insider's Guide to Energy is brought to you by Fidectis. Go to www.fidectis.com for more information.
Welcome to Insider's Guide to Energy. I'm your host, Chris Sass, and with me is co-host Johan Oberg. Johan, how's it going this week?
Doing good, Chris. Another week, another day. Great to be on again. Feels like it was a while ago, but it was last week, so ready to go. How's your week been?
My week's been going great. We've been really busy at my day job. We have been working really hard, get some new customers on board, so it's exciting times in the energy market. We're getting ready for the ETOT conference, which will be a first face-to-face conference in London just a few weeks out. So we're excited and optimistic that we're actually going to go to a conference.
Same thing. We just came off of our weekly marketing planning meeting in my day job, and we start looking at with the local teams, and suddenly we're starting to see the events opening up. More and more coming in, more and more physical meetings. But I'm still looking forward and seeing where this hybrid is going to lead us. Because I think that we're dying to go out and meet people again. I think the event business will boom for a bit of time now because we're really, especially me, itching to get out there. But then you come back to efficiency. And then I think we come back a little bit to this hybrid model. So I've already signed up for a number of webinars or actually virtual meetings that I could have attended in real life. But I thought, why not? Why not start finding this hybrid now? And I'm only going to go to the ones that I think is really, really important. The rest I will follow online.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm there yet. I still think there's value in face-to-face, but I think the world is adjusting. It's interesting that we're all getting excited about meetings just as the news and the press talks about potential lockdowns and more restrictions. But I'm still bullish that we'll still have these meetings. So I noticed another thing is that you last couple episodes seem to be in your office.
I am. So offices are opening up, which once again, a little bit of a hybrid version coming back, coming out of my living room after a year and a half or whatever it is. It's fantastic. I love my home, but there's a limit to what you can do. So good to be back meeting the colleagues in real life. We had in the pre-show talking about coffee. That's the downside. The coffee machine at the office is not as good as the one I have at home. So, but I can live with that.
Well, I'm glad to see you back. What I think I'd like to talk about is what the show's about today, because our audience wants to hear about battery technology, and I'm excited to learn more. If you look at what we've done over the last few weeks and last few guests, I think we talked recently to a company that was helping revolutionize how lithium is mined and brought into existence. But lithium apparently isn't the only kind of battery out there.
No, and this is when I did a little bit of the kind of preparations and the background around this as well. Suddenly, a number of new technologies came out. As you said, the lithium and the way you almost fracking lithium was new to me. Now we're talking about long-term battery storage as well. I think this is really, really interesting. You know, my background and knowledge around batteries literally a few years ago was Tesla and Northvolt, the Swedish company. That's kind of my limit around this. I really look forward to see what is going on and how it's interrelated also to us as an energy company. And as you know, I can always, I'm always interested in the transformation, new companies, the entrepreneurial spirit around this. So I'll throw out a few questions around this as well.
Well, I think you'll like this guest because he has an entrepreneurial spirit. He's done this before. But rather than speculating, as we always say, let's jump in and introduce our guests. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Eric Dresslehouse. Eric is the CEO of ESS. Eric, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me, Johan.
Well, we're excited to have you on. So, you heard our preamble saying we're going to talk about batteries because I think that's what ESS does, or perhaps shipping containers. I'm not exactly sure what you guys do, but you got a lot of pretty pictures of shipping containers on your website. So maybe you should do a little introduction of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, excited to be here. And, what could be more exciting to talk about than batteries, really? So the first thing is, if you think about what's happening, to lay some context, what we're trying to do is really a little bit like magic, right? Because the one thing we all know about electricity is it's a real time thing, right? We flip the switch and the light comes on, and we didn't have to plan for that. We didn't have to phone in our order. We didn't have to wait 24 hours for that electricity to get delivered to the house. We just expect it to be there all the time in real time. And as we're trying to decarbonize the energy system, that becomes more challenging. So we've got to do this kind of magic act of time shifting energy from when we produce it to when we use it. And that's really just to kind of lay the fundamental groundwork for what we're doing and what a lot of other people are doing around energy storage, which has become in some ways a part of all of our lives. Everybody has a cell phone. They all know that it has a battery. They all are very thoughtful about having to charge it and when they're going to use it. But what we're working on at ESS is something at a much, in some ways, grander scale. We're doing long duration storage for the grid for fixed, applications, and that's important now because of renewables. Renewables, as we all know, are kind of inherently intermittent. The wind doesn't always blow, the sun does not always shine, and we've all really, as a society, recognized and declared the importance of creating an energy system that's been decarbonized. And so, how do you solve that? And enter long duration energy storage.
So we had this conversation in when we were talking about setting up this call and not understanding long term, short term in the differential, what that means. Maybe framing that would help the audience as well as us as to what long term storage is.
Sure. And first thing I'd say is, we'll say storage and we'll probably say batteries and we'll probably intermix those things, but they're not exactly the same thing. There are ways you can store energy that are not batteries per se, in terms of, batteries as a bit of chemistry that you use. But let's stick with storage as the thing. So short duration storage, which has been around and used on the grid for a long time, is typically defined as kind of a 1 to 4 hour duration. Having some way to buffer the system to help ride out short duration outages, so a blip on the system, or in some cases used by utilities to help stabilize the system. So you'll hear terms like ancillary services, injecting frequency into the network to keep the whole system stable, but it's relatively short duration. Then there's this category of long duration storage, which is what we work on, which is kind of broadly speaking from 4 to 24 hours of time. And that's really important because that's how you create a 24/7 decarbonized system most of the time, right? So think of it as taking the electricity you generated from solar panels during the day, storing it up, and then getting you through the evening hours and dinner time and overnight, so that we can have decarbonized energy then. Today, what we do normally is we fire up the gas-fired peaker plants, and that's how we get through the night. And then there's this other category, which people will call different things. Ultra long duration is what we most typically hear. And those are people that are working on energy storage techniques that are designed to be used kind of seasonally. Think of it as days or weeks worth of electricity that are stored, that are used, much less frequently, but really solve a pretty big problem when it is used. So think about it: what happens if the wind didn't blow for 5 days? and you were reliant on wind power to make your electricity, that doesn't happen very often, but when it does happen, it's a big problem.
So when we come back to this, I think we had on the shows before, and I think not only me, but definitely me as well, mixing up the whole thing. So I'm really glad you clarify short and long term. But if we look at it from an energy grid point of view, you're saying up to 24 hours. That's quite some time. If we don't have anything, we need to back up 24 hours with battery capacity. That requires quite a lot of capacity. Where are we in terms of of building this? Because we have the coal fire, as you mentioned, they're already there. People will say that they need to be there for forever, maybe not forever and forever, but for a fairly long time. So where are we in terms of battery in order to make sure that 24 hours, are we there, or when are we there?
Well, I think we're getting there, and the market's changing pretty quickly. Again, driven by this desire to decarbonize. So, if you look and of course varies country to country, region to region. But what we have found is that when renewable penetration was rather low, think it was 2%, 4%, 6% of our energy supply, we didn't pay a lot of attention to it, right? Because we just kind of absorbed it and we used it. And, I'll say we were thankful that we had what we could get when we could get it. I remember giving a talk back in 2003 or 4 where we were all excited that in the US, we thought we might hit 5% renewable penetration. And that seemed like a pretty big deal back then. Fast forward, many geographies now are 20% or 25% renewable penetration, with ambitions, kind of stated by regulators or actually codified into law that says 70%, 80%, 100% decarbonized by say 2030, 2040. And so think of it as an evolution, Johan. Where we're at today, I'll start with it. Not so many years ago, 1-2 years ago, all of the energy storage projects you would have seen would have been short duration, 2 to 4 hour time frame, 4 really on the high side. A lot of 1 and 2 hour projects just to provide that ancillary service, which was the first problem that people saw. Now, fast forward a couple of years to where we are today, we've seen the market jump dramatically more towards the 8 to 10 and on to 12 hours. And if you think about it, in many geographies, especially those with really high solar penetration, if you have a reliable 12-hour battery, you can you get pretty close to a 24-hour system most of the time. You can get 12 hours of sunshine, pair it with 12 hours of storage, and that's a day. Yeah. But I think as time goes by, as we get to penetrations north of 70%, then we're going to need some of those ultra long duration storage solutions to kind of tuck in around the edges to handle the edge cases. Because the starting point for most people is when I flip the switch, the lights have to come on, right? And we've talked about this electrify everything idea. We're electrifying transportation, we're electrifying buildings. We want to take natural gas out of buildings. We want to put everything on electricity. That's kind of great. The reasoning for that, I should say, is that we know that we can generate that electricity in a carbon-free way. But what it is going to do is put a lot of pressure on the system to keep the resiliency up and make sure that the lights come on when we flip the switch.
So what Johan asked, I guess, was the question, in your previous life, you also were a grid expert as well, was it takes a tremendous amount of power to sustain baseload or whatever at a given time. And in the opening, I offhandedly joked and teased you about having shipping containers, but I think your batteries can be delivered. I don't know if they always are in these big, look like a formerly shipping container, that you take them out, and I assume you stack them out or make a farm of these things if you need more capacity. Or is that how that works?
Yeah, kind of. So we do make a shipping container based version we call an energy warehouse, and that's the full battery system in a box. And people that like that are, think of it as commercial industrial customers, college campuses, microgrids, love that kind of a thing because it's really easy to set up. You can literally drop the box in place, hydrate the battery, do a little startup routine, and it's off and running. Then we make a system that's a bigger scale system, which we call an energy center, and that can be the size of a building. So really big batteries, but tens of megawatts of capacity.
And then, so
So
do
I
you
have a
have these
question.
buildings? Go ahead, Jan.
So just out of curiosity, we ran a project a while ago at my company where we work with big outdoor venues, so concert arenas, etc. And we replaced a lot of the diesel engines with industrial batteries. So literally, what I saw on your website, a big container kind of a thing, battery, and it lasted for a short period of time, well, fair bit of time at least. To a few parts of this worked perfectly fine. Obviously, we knew the customer. It was outdoor events that wanted to become green. In your cases, who is actually, I think I'm understanding the reasoning, or I do understand the reasoning behind it, and I think it's an important part as we will elaborate on the long term. But who's your customers? Is it the utility? Is it the grid operators? Who's buying this from you? Or
Well,
who are you
yeah,
working with?
yeah, a little bit of all of the above. So we work with, large commercial and industrial customers. So maybe your concert venue would have been a good a good case for us. We have a lot of customers who are large commercial users of electricity who have already put solar panels on their roof. So they've already started this journey, and they've said, "Geez, how do I get to be 24/7? How do I take over responsibility for my own resiliency of my own supply?" And you can do that with our kind of battery. But we also sell to utilities. We also our products are used by IPPs, big independent power producers, who are building, in some cases, just to use an example, very large solar plant. But they want to now pair solar plus storage at great scale because they want to be able to shape the delivery of that energy over the course of the day. An example we've seen in the U.S. is if you're in a market that has high solar penetration and you want to build a solar plant that's going to be cranking away, making a lot of electricity at 1-2 o'clock in the afternoon, there's no buyers. California dumped a gigawatt of juicy, sweet, carbon-free electricity into the ground last year because there were no takers at the right time. And so if you're an independent power producer, you've got a real challenge, which is your economics are all on the assumption that somebody wants this great power you're generating. And if nobody wants to take it at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I will tell you that there's a lot of people who will take it at 6 o'clock at night.
Well, that makes sense. I could see that you want to use your electron when you want to use it, and wasting them doesn't seem to be all that productive. I also think that in doing a little show prep, that I did a little research in startups and technologies focused on flow battery technology, and I found at least one list with over 120 startups in the space. So I don't think you're wrong, right? I mean, there's certainly money chasing the problem that others agree with you. What makes ESS different? I mean, so you were actually ranked in the top 5 in one of the lists I looked at. So you're definitely doing something right. What's your special sauce? What's different between you and 120 other aspiring flow battery companies?
We're not number one. That hurts. So what we do is, you're absolutely right. Let me level set it a little bit. There are a number of different technologies that are used within the category that we play in, flow batteries. Flow batteries are different than lithium batteries or alkaline batteries, that you put into your remote control. A flow battery is interesting in that it stores electricity through a chemical reaction, but the electrolyte, the juice, if you will, is kept separate from the power electronics. So effectively, what that does for the energy geeks on listening in is it separates power from energy. So you could decide, as an example, that you wanted, let's say, a 3 megawatt power configuration, but then you wanted 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours of duration, which is, of course, the energy component. And you can separate that. You get more duration by adding more juice. So what we use within ours, so that's, and all flow batteries work that way. There are flow battery technologies that have been around and studied for a long time using chemicals like vanadium. And vanadium works, but vanadium is kind of spendy. It's just an expensive technology chemically that makes it a little cost prohibitive to use at great scale. What we use is an iron salt based solution. So this is known as an iron flow redox battery. And we think its great advantage is that if you think about cost structure, what's cheaper and more abundant than iron, salt, and water?
Makes sense.
It's really got kind of the best long-term price. You know, you've got a lot of work to do, and of course, there's always a lot of engineering and a lot of optimization that happens at an operational level. But the starting point is iron, salt, and water.
Does environment play a big role, like temperature in performance? I mean, I know you said you could build it in a building so you can control these things, but is that a big variable on the amount of power you get?
It's actually one of the great advantages of this technology is it has an extremely wide operating range of temperature. If anybody that's worked with lithium knows that lithium's pretty fussy. And you've seen fires in Australia and other places. It has to be temperature controlled. It has a very narrow operating range around 25 C. And if it gets any hotter or any colder, it doesn't like it very well. The iron flow battery will operate from minus 10 to plus 65 C pretty reliably. So it actually kind of likes to run a little bit hot. So we have applications sitting out in the middle of the desert in Nevada where it just kind of hums along and does its thing. So it likes that pretty well. But I'd say the environment question where I thought you were maybe going to go with that, Chris, is the environmental impact of storage. I think people probably are aware. It sounds like you had somebody on the show earlier talking about lithium extraction. There's a growing concern around some of the sourcing of materials that go into other solutions. Lithium sourcing, cobalt, nickel, other rare earth minerals that are used are pretty problematic. And there are people working on those, and they're trying to work on recycling techniques that aren't just burning the battery in an incinerator, which is what mostly happens today. One of the great things about iron flow is that it is a nearly entirely recyclable, entirely non-toxic solution. So to answer your question, what have we done that other people haven't done? Well, the biggest thing is we have a product that works. A lot of companies that have worked on this, it's still in kind of the science experiment category, which is great. I kind of love that on a personal level. I like people innovating and doing interesting things. But we actually have a commercial product that works. And that's what's driving a lot of the interest now, because it's been a bit of a holy grail kind of thing across the industry where people have said, geez, if we could find a safe, reliable, low-cost way to store our energy, that would really change the game in terms of how we think about the grid.
So in terms of that, we read about lithium batteries in cars and the life cycle of this and how that before they need to be replaced, and then you have the secondhand batteries on top of that one. Is there any kind of restrictions on flow batteries in terms of life cycle or length or?
No, not really. I mean, you can cycle this battery effectively, unlimited numbers of times. We talk about a 20-year operating life of the system, but the electrolyte doesn't wear out, as it were. So it's not like a lithium battery where its efficacy is going to kind of slowly start to fade. We probably have all seen that. You get a new cell phone, and in the beginning it's awesome and it lasts all day and you never have to recharge it. And then by year 2, you got to recharge it a couple of times during the middle of the day. And by year 5, at some point, you probably will end up trading your cell phone out simply because of the battery life as much as any other single factor in deciding to upgrade your phone. Flow batteries don't have any of those problems. And they also are not terribly fussy in terms of how they're used. So we get a lot of customers who come to us and say, I looked at a lithium solution, but then there were all these rules. I had to charge it 100% all the way to the top if I started to recharge it. And then once I did, I had to let it rest for 4 hours. And then I could start to discharge it, but I had to discharge it all the way down to 20%, but no more than 20%, charge. And then I had to rest again, and then I had to recharge. And so that's kind of not the way grid operators operate. Grid operators are kind of real time orchestrating a very complex set of interdependencies. And so they want to be able to use it for a little bit, turn it off, charge it back up, run it all the way to the bottom, charge it all the way to the top, so on and so forth.
So you talked about grid operators. We talked about some industrial uses. Let's talk about the market a little bit in where we go with it. So do people buy the batteries, lease the batteries from you? How does this tech work?
So in our case, we sell the batteries. We're a technology company. We sell technology to all of those players that I mentioned. In some cases, they are just built into the economics and the rate structure of the utility or paid for by the business. And their business case is often measured by deferred, peak capacity charges or being able to time shift their energy use if they're on a time of use rate. So a commercial customer would get an economic payback, but they would typically operate it on their own behalf. Whereas a big IPP, a big solar developer, might use our technology and build it into a dollars per kilowatt, euros per kilowatt solution that they're selling into the market. And so they may be playing all of the arbitrages and market interactions that these kinds of people play, and they're using the battery as a way to shift when and how those transactions happen.
So has it gotten to the point where it's a back of the napkin kind of calculation for a developer who's going to put in a renewable project, saying, okay, well, 10% goes to storage, or 15% of whatever the project is goes to a storage, or is it still kind of nascent and people figuring it out as they go?
Well, I think it's a both. I think people are figuring it out as they go. It also, frankly, depends a little bit on local circumstances. So, there's a joke here in the States, all politics are local. I would say all grid economics are local, right? What the value of different grid assets and grid capabilities are really depends on what market you are playing in and how you live. In some parts of Europe where people are off on remote or islanded grids, it's a very different set of economics than if you were in downtown Zurich and maybe there's no capacity or ancillary services markets for you to play into. Your economics might be very different if you're in a geography that allows full net metering for your solar assets, which is what most people have done. But we're starting to see a real shift away from that because it's economically untenable to go pay people full retail rates for electricity at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and then have the utility turn around and ground that electricity into the dirt because there's no takers for that. And of course that creates equity issues across the ratepayer base. So it really depends a little bit on where you go and what the local market requirements or market conditions are.
So, which I think is interesting. We're talking about the sustainability angle around this as well, and we talked about the production. One thing that I heard between the lines a little bit, you mentioned that you're a technology company, which obviously triggers my interest, of course, because when we're discussing a little bit, we're talking about hardware in terms of large capacity batteries and the production of these. But so how do you define yourself as a technology company delivering hardware?
Yeah, well, I'd say that Apple thinks of itself as a technology company too, and they deliver a fair amount of hardware. It's really creating a solution that works, right? So we developed when you asked Chris asked earlier why ESS has been so successful and why it's getting as much recognition as it is. Um, our technical team has solved one of a couple of the really great problems that have held flow batteries back over the years by using really simple ingredients, iron, salt, and water. Of
Mm.
course, we gives us a great cost structure, but it takes a little bit of technical magic to make that work. So we've had to invent a couple of pieces of technology that are embedded in the system to keep things in balance and keep the system really clean. Anybody can go to our website and see some pictures, but we developed a thing which we call the proton pump, which is taking some of the byproduct of our chemical reaction, which is hydrogen, and using it to keep the system clean and in balance so that you don't have to shut the system down and clean it. There's things called dendrites that build up, which you can think of it as looks like lime scale on the side of your
Yeah.
bathtub, right? That can be a real problem, and it makes some batteries frankly just impractical to use. So having a system that can operate with effectively no scheduled maintenance other than kind of checking in and monitoring is something that's really desirable to a grid operator.
So I buy the technology argument all day long. I look at your history, your scientists, and being there. I think it's important to know you guys aren't a new company. You've been around for a little while. You're somewhat mature, right? I think if I remember correctly, 2010, 2011, somewhere in there, I
Yeah.
think is when you guys came into formation. So where is the company? You're not the first CEO. You've come in and you're taking it into the next level. Where's the company at today? Where are you guys at? Are you?
Oh,
I
there's a
didn't have an
hanging.
end to that. I was
Yeah,
leaving it open ended for you to tell me.
yeah. So you're right. The company was founded in 2011, and for the first bunch of years of the company, it was a true R&D house solving a really hard technical problem. And so our co-founders, Craig and Julia, were toiling away, inventing things like the proton pump, learning how to build it with great reliability, great scale. We can come back to that in a minute. And started shipping product a few years back for a first generation product, learned a lot, and then that led to the development of a second generation product, which is what we ship today. So we're now a production shipping company. We are also going through an IPO process, so we'll be a publicly traded company, and we'll be the first publicly traded long duration storage company around. So we think that's pretty cool, and that does a couple of things for us, but largely it gives us some resources to really accelerate the global expansion of what we're trying to do, both from a go-to-market perspective and a manufacturing perspective, because the one thing you do find about products in the energy business in general, and certainly those that have hardware, is they really want to get to scale really quickly, right? You kind of got to get big to get all of the efficiencies and leverage out of the business that you want.
So where is production?
So today, most of our production is headquartered here in Oregon, in Wilsonville, Oregon, just south of Portland. But one of the really cool things about ESS, because of the nature of our technology, our expectation, as we've shared publicly, is that we expect to open manufacturing capabilities within the region of use. So we would expect, we've already started to identify some potential in Australia and New Zealand, and then Europe will likely be right behind that. Because we use pretty broadly available and commonly sourceable materials, combined with the fact that our thing, as you pointed out before, is pretty big. So shipping it's real work. Our plan is to build locally and have facilities located around the world.
So you just said you're going to be a publicly traded company. I guess it started its history as more of a research organization. So that's a technology angle. You've come up with a better mousetrap, for lack of a better term. I think I've heard you say on previous talks about the industry's acceptance of new technology, that it really just needs to work. There's no alpha or beta trial. It just kind of needs to be there. So have you partnered with large grid operators that you can talk about in North America? Is there any success stories you can share with our audience?
Yeah, well, there's a number of success stories, and not just grid operators. We've worked across kind of a broad range of market participants and kind of other industry stalwarts. The first one I'd call out, which I think is a really interesting one, is we have a longstanding relationship with Munich Re. And you might say, I didn't know that Munich Re, the giant German reinsurance company, ran a grid. And of course, the answer is they don't. But they are the largest and arguably most reputable reinsurer in the world. And our group sat with them and said, listen, this is a new company in an industry with a really high bar. How can we prove the bankability, financeability, durability of the company and the product? And so they went to work. Munich Re brought all of their technical experts in and spent 18 months kind of understanding our technology. And what that resulted in was we offer an extended warranty on our product that's backed by Munich Re. So when people buy our product, they can buy up to 10 years of guarantee behind that, which isn't just backed by ESS's good word, it's backed by Munich Re. So it's got real teeth to it. And that's really been a game changer out in the marketplace, because we think we're the only battery company of any kind, certainly and the only one in long duration, that offers that kind of a guaranteed back product. Then we've got customer projects that run the gamut. The one that kind of immediately comes to mind is not a utility, it's a big IPP, SoftBank Energy. So SoftBank, everybody probably knows, but SoftBank Energy is their group that goes off and develops very large scale solar projects. And we have a framework agreement with them in addition to near-term projects, that after they understood the technology and started to use it, to put 2 gigawatt hours of capacity out on the grid over the next couple of years. And then the last one that I'll call it, that's more of an investor, but they're really some of the smartest people in the energy world, is one of the I say early, the last 5 years, backers that stepped in once our technology was developed was Bill Gates and the Breakthrough Energy group. And so Breakthrough is really, trying to place the big bets on the game-changing technologies that are going to move the needle in the energy world. And so we're pretty happy to have them on board. In terms of utility projects, it really runs the gamut. We've worked with people in the US, but we've worked with people, one that just comes to mind that's a really interesting use case is a group called Grupo Saesa down in Chile. So they are using our technology as a way to replace diesel generation in Patagonia. So if you've ever been to Patagonia, or even just kind of know what it is, of course, it's one of the most beautiful, pristine parts of the world. And they've largely powered electricity locally through what's called run-of-river hydro. So it's a hydro plant that's not a dam. So it just kind of, you get what you get, whatever the river happens to give you that day. And then they've enhanced that with diesel generation. Which, if you think about it, just kind of, makes the hair on your neck stand up. Why would you turn on a dirty, polluting diesel engine in Patagonia? So they want to get rid of all of those, or at least minimize as much as possible their use. And so they're using our technology to take excess capacity that's made by the run-of-the-river hydro, and then use that as the bridge for when they need it. So lots of use cases across all sorts of different applications.
I think that's pretty exciting to hear all the different applications you've got and where it's going. And so being a technologist myself, what I think I heard you say in previous question as well was you're kind of at the 2.0 version of this technology. So it's transformative in what you've told us so far. If I take everything at face value, there's clearly a transformation. where does it go from here? What is the next incremental step for long-term storage? So you're in the business, you have some product that's able to meet the need today. If we're looking at Paris Climate Accord goals and kind of the goals globally that people talk about, there's some pretty aggressive things that need to happen in the next, I don't know how many years, right? And so what's next?
Yeah, well, I'd answer that in a couple of different ways. The first, and I'm glad you brought up the Paris Accord, and of course, Edinburgh coming up here in November. Um, uh, there has been a lot of progress made at national levels, at local and state levels to create decarbonization goals, which are great, and we love those. But of course, those are just ambitions. And so somebody then has to do the next level of work, which says, okay, great, we want to have a 24/7 decarbonized electricity system. And oh, by the way, we want to electrify everything. So perhaps that's going to require a 25% growth in the total electricity demand. And, electricity has been a pretty flat market for the last 25 years. So now we're talking about changing that and making electricity a growth market, but a green growth market. Getting the policies right, getting the economic incentives right is really the first thing that has to happen, and that's true for ESS. It's true really for the entire market. We've got to get the market structures right. But then I think where you were going with your question is, I think you're going to see a couple of things. The first is it's incumbent on us and on all of the other folks working on this to make it cheaper, right? We all want to, the lower the cost to store energy is, the more acceptable it will be for use, on a broader and broader and broader basis. So there's a cost out curve, just like you've seen in solar, just like you've seen in wind. You're going to see a cost curve in storage to make it even more and more cost effective. The second thing I think you're going to see is you're gonna need to build a lot of them, right? So just manufacturing capacity, supply chain has got to get cranked up to meet this. And I mentioned that we build here in Wilsonville, Oregon, but we really build it here. It's not just the three pieces get snapped together. I mean, we are welding things and building stuff here, and we like that model. We're working very hard to avoid some of the problems with supply chains that extend into China, that use rare earth minerals mined by, slave children in the Republic of the Congo, right? That's not where we want to be. That's not our idea of what a great sustainability journey is. So we're working to create the supply chains that are sustainable from the bottom up. And then finally, because we talked about technology, there are just a ton of things that you can do to continue to push the technology forward. You can get better energy density. You can get faster charging, what's called round trip efficiencies. You can just do things to make it, in the broadest sense, better, faster, cheaper.
Johan?
Yeah, I think coming out of it, we're talking about sustainability a little bit. Once again, I think if we're shifting focus a little bit away from the actual batteries and the technology, and a little bit more to you as a person. Obviously, I went through some of your background and looked at and some of the engagement you have. Sits on a number of boards of companies. Pretty sure with your background in technology and as an innovator and a transformer, you get a lot of offers. But what makes you choose to take on these additional parts? Are you driven? What are you driven by? Is it the technology? Obviously, there's financial. Is it sustainability? What drives you? What makes you get engaged in all of these companies?
I have an unhealthy addiction to working on big problems. Right. To me, what gets I've been really fortunate that I've never been a person that has that moment where they wake up in the morning and go, "Oh God, do I have to get out of bed?" I usually jump out of bed in the morning because my brain instantly kicks into all of the things that are out there that could go get worked on. And so, energy is a fascinating area to work. I feel really fortunate that I that I found my way to this industry, because it's so pervasive. It touches so many lives. It's so truly important that when I think about the fact that there are, still roughly 500 million people on Earth that do not have access to the regular supply of electricity. I've known this for a long time, and every time I think about it, I find that stunning. And I have a lot of friends that are working on very specific implementations of solving that part of the problem. But I like puzzles. I like a puzzle that's hard to solve, that takes a lot of coordination. You work across regulatory, technical, commercial aspects, and unwinding all of that is for me a lot of fun. And I can tell you that when you solve it, as we did at my last company, Silver Spring Networks, as we're doing here at ESS, it's as gratifying a professional experience as you can have to actually see the success on the other side of the problem.
Which really like the questions and then the answer to it, because I was actually reading an article where they quoted you before, which you referred to an old statement of Jimmy Carter, the president, where the solution is actually just put on a jumper and we'll be fine and lower the temperature. And you claim that that's totally the wrong direction. There's a problem, we'll solve it rather than adapt to it. So I thought it was quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard somebody, and I don't remember this, I certainly remember the scene of him sitting by the fire, telling everybody to just kind of grin and bear it. What I hadn't realized until somebody reminded me the other day was that it was also just ride the bus, right? But then we're not going to do anything to make public transportation better. We just think you should have to suffer through. And in the States, anyone who's ridden the bus, it's not a pleasurable experience. Certainly parts of Europe have fantastically better public transportation options than we have here in the States. So I think that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to, apply technology and innovation to make this a case where I don't want anyone to have to use less electricity. That's going to sound a little crazy because a lot of conservationists will say, "Oh, we just have to use less." But if it had no environmental impact, why would we care? If we could take the environmental impact, and I'm talking about the entirety from the supply chain, through to the production, through to disposal at the end of life. If that didn't have a negative impact, or it could be a minimal, measurable, and addressable impact, then we wouldn't care. And I think that's a fun thing to go work on.
I think that's great. I think energy is complex, right? And so with the naivety of when I was new in the business, I would say, well, yeah, we got to be all carbon neutral. We ought to be green tomorrow, but there's always a give and take, right? So there's nothing for free. There's if energy is stored somewhere, there's an impact. But I think marginal impact or limited impact, right? I don't see that there's a world with no impact, because if you're mining iron, you're mining iron. You're using resources. But humans have always done that, and I don't think people would argue that we don't have some impact. It's just negligible impact.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And listen, we use iron and we use it for 20 years. And at the end of the 20 years, the thing that breaks is the pump. It's not the actual iron. So you could take the electrolyte out of the first battery and just move it to the next battery and use it for another 20 years. So you can do things in clever ways that meet the needs of society and don't destroy the earth, and those are fun things to go work on.
I'd have to agree with that. I do have one final question from me. So you've evolved a new technology, a new area of the energy business, and what careers? So if someone's been in energy and they're in some form of energy that's probably going to go away, and they like the energy business, because I think there's a great future in it. There's always need for energy. What new skills or new jobs are created through your solution?
Well, a ton, and I tell everybody on the call that if you're thinking about making the career move Chris mentioned, please call us, because we one of our challenges for growth is hiring fast enough to go. I'd say a couple of things. The first, at the basic level, we're doing the high quality skilled manufacturing work that everybody bemoans has disappeared. We do that, and we need to hire people fast, and we pay good wages to do that. So come work on the factory floor, at the basic level. But there's also, really across the spectrum of the technology and working on, the electrochemistry that's involved to make it go further on through to the economic modeling. We have a lot of work to do to help educate people and understand better how to best use the technology to create the maximum value out in the wild, as they say, out on the grid on a daily basis. So we need everybody from electrochemicists, if I could speak, to economists, to all come on and join the effort.
Cool. That's my last question. Johan, any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I thought it was really, really interesting. I got a much more sense around batteries and also the sustainability around this. I wish I had more time to talk a little bit about your background in IoT and all the entrepreneurial stuff, but maybe we'll bring you back another time if we have the opportunity. But really appreciate the call. I thought it was really interesting to understand and learn more about batteries and how that fits in. So thanks a lot for joining.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and appreciate what you're doing with the podcast, because it is the most important topic out there right now, and so the more we can spread the word and help educate and share, it's all to the benefit of us as individuals and us as a society.
Well, thank you so much, Eric, for being our guest. It's been a pleasure. For our audience, you've spent another hour listening to Insider's Guide to Energy. And if you've not yet subscribed, please subscribe and tell your friends about us.